Hello and welcome to another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. My name is Nasim Ahmed and I will be your host. Today we are asking, is Lebanon a failed state? To discuss this question and to get an update on the latest situation in Lebanon, I am joined by Mohammed Kozbar. Lebanese National Kozbar is the Deputy Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain and the chairman of Finsbury Park Mosque, one of the most prominent Islamic centers in the UK. And he's also a member of the National Council of the MCB. Kozbar is also a member of the Islington Faiths Forum, representing the Muslim community in North London, as well as being a regular IB Times UK and Middle East columnist. He sits on a number of boards and panels, including the ITV London News, and is a member of the Police Islington Advisory Group. Mohammed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's great. So let's get straight into the main question. A failed state is a state that has lost its ability to govern its population. It is a state that can no longer perform its basic security functions and provide basic services to its population. Is that a definition that can be applied to Lebanon?
Well, Lebanon is going through very difficult and challenging time these days. It's been a long time when they have this prosperity and stability, more than 30 years now. And now they are going really through a very difficult time. Since the revolution in 2019, when it's happened, things getting from bad to worse in Lebanon, unfortunately, because, the situation is changed. We have the exclusion of the port and so on. And basically, everything's collapsed in Lebanon. The public services collapsed. There is no electricity. There is no water. People cannot afford to go to hospitals. The health sector, the education sector has been collapsed in Lebanon because of that. I'm not here putting blame on the revolution. I'm putting blame on the corrupt and incompetent rulers who rule Lebanon, who control everything in Lebanon. They use that to put Lebanon in this situation, unfortunately. And I can say, frankly, that Lebanon is on the brink of a failed state.
On the brink, yes. And you mentioned corruption. You mentioned failed state as well. But to get an idea of how dysfunctional Lebanon has become, it's split into two time zones in a row over daylight saving. How did we reach a point where the country cannot even agree on the time?
This is a funny and embarrassing thing for not just only for the Lebanese government, but as well for the Lebanese people, actually, to have two local times split between the Lebanese, sometimes in the same street, even in the airport and in the shops. And it's really, it's never happened, by the way, in a country. So this is a unique thing for about Lebanon. It is yes, we can say it's funny, but it shows how much divided is the country, how much divided are the communities. Unfortunately, some politicians try to use this for sectarian issues, especially it happens during Ramadan and people link it to Ramadan. And some politicians like Jubran Basil and others who really inflame the situation because of that. This shows you how much we are close to the situation when the civil war started in 1975 in Lebanon. So we hope that this never happened. Lebanese people still remember these very difficult days when hundreds of thousands of people being killed and the country is destroyed. And we don't want to get to get back to this era. So hopefully we'll never get back to this era. But this shows how divided is the communities in Lebanon.
Yes, and do you know? I mean, practically, what kind of impact is it having on the various communities? If you can't agree on the time, are Muslims also divided on what time it is? So which would mean breaking of the iftar, for example, would be quite a complication. One would say, oh, iftar is at 6 o'clock. Another would say, no, iftar is at 7 o'clock. So what kind of impact is that having?
Well, in terms of iftar, because we all have iftar on when the
sun
sets. So the problem is that it's being used as sectarian tools, actually, from some politicians, and this really very dangerous. They didn't recognize how dangerous this is, and how much problems might cause the country. It's being sorted now. The time is one now. Again, it's summertime. But again, this shows how much division we have in Lebanon, and that's really make a lot of Lebanese concerned that if a small issue like this about time we are divided in that way, what about bigger issues? when it comes to bigger issues, how much?
And the issue is very big, and the crisis in Lebanon is greater than its inability to agree on the time. The World Bank, for example, has classified the Lebanese crisis as one of the 10 worst economic crises globally since the 19th century, and possibly as one of the top 3. So price of everything is going through the roof. So tell us how this has impacted on various sectors of Lebanese society, including the rich and the middle class and the poor. So how has it impacted those various sectors of society?
Well, according to the World Bank, it is one of the most severe economic collapse seen internationally since the 1850s. So it's a huge
even worse
crisis, almost affect every Lebanese. I can say just only a small number of corrupt politicians and incompetent politicians and some billionaires who become more billionaires. The rich in Lebanon, the rich people become more richer during this crisis, and the poor people became more poorer. We are talking here about more than 95% of people are now poorer than they were just a couple of years ago or 3 years ago. Rich people, they almost about 5% of the population, they become more richer because they have the influence and they have the ability to survive in these circumstances. Imagine families cannot afford to buy the basic materials to their families, the liras, which is the currency of Lebanon, lost more than 95% of its value. So the dollar was about 1,500 liras before 2019. Now the dollar is 110,000 liras. So imagine, and people still getting paid by liras in Lebanon. So who are getting paid for 3 million, they still have paid 3 million.
So what do people do with their money? Say people, members of your family, if they get their salary, so within weeks or the currency, because the fluctuation, its value decreases. So what do they do with that money? Can they save it? Can they demand, we want to be paid in dollars or something else? What do they do?
Well, they do nothing with the money because you are talking about $20 to $30 per month. So they live with $1 per day, actually, which is nothing in Lebanon because everything in Lebanon is very expensive. They used to have this amount of money used to be value about $700, $800, which is fine for people in Lebanon to live with. But now imagine people live with $30 or $20. So people are suffering because of that. They are in desperate situation for help. The only relief probably that many families in Lebanon, they have family members abroad, whether it is in Gulf or in Gulf countries or in Europe or in the United States, who sent financial support to their families to sustain the situation and live with it. But this is, we can't say this is a strategy or this is something which will sort out the problems in Lebanon. This is something which is now helping Lebanese people for a while, but after that, God knows what would happen if the situation is still as it is at the moment.
Yeah, in terms of the impact, let's sticking to that for now. You mentioned, families from abroad helping the Lebanese. We know Lebanon has one of the highest percentage of its population working abroad. So are more and more Lebanese thinking of leaving the country? Because as you mentioned, at the moment, there's only the rich class and the poor class, and the middle class, who are essential to any country's sustainability, is no longer there. So are more and more middle class people thinking, this is not for me, I'm going to go wherever I can? Is that the kind of story you're hearing from your people you know in Lebanon?
Well, there's no middle class people in Lebanon, either rich or poor. The middle class people, as you said, mainly they left the country. I know from my family members, actually, many of my family members, my cousins, my niece, my nephews, they left the country. They left either to Gulf countries. Some of them came here to the UK. Some of them went to United States. And it's difficult to leave, by the way. It's not easy, but they are doing everything to leave, actually. And this, well, you know, these people who grow up in Lebanon, studied in Lebanon, they are the ones who will build the future for Lebanon. Now they are desperate to leave, and they might never come back to Lebanon. That's the problem. And then the society in Lebanon will be without all these people who might be might help building or rebuilding Lebanon in the near future or in the future. So we lost really a treasure of people from all sectors in Lebanon, leaving to different countries because of this situation, and no one blamed them. No one blamed them because they lost everything. They lost their savings in the banks. The banks doesn't give people their savings. They lost them. They're still giving them on the 1,500 liras a dollars, while the dollars is 110,000 liras. So imagine they lost almost 90 or 95% of their savings. So they feel that they have nothing to lose if they go out and start their futures elsewhere. And as I said, no one should blame them for that. We should blame only these corrupt politicians who force these people to leave their country.
Yes, so moving into politicians and politics, I mean, is it too simplistic to suggest that if Lebanon was able to resolve its sectarian divisions, something which is kind of built into the state, the economic crisis would be over? Is that a reflection of the political crisis, and simply solve the political situation and the economy would be back to normal? Is that how you see it as well?
Well, I don't think the economic crisis is the only crisis we have in Lebanon. We have many crises, unfortunately, in Lebanon. One of them is the most affected one, which affect people, is the economic crisis. But we have we have no president in Lebanon for months now, and these corrupt politicians, they know that without having a president, which is the first step to put Lebanon on track again. And still they are divided between themselves because each one of them they want to bring their own the president which they can benefit from. So therefore we don't have the government is not functioning properly.
So what happened? There was an election last year, 2022. So what's the situation now? I know Hezbollah lost its majority. So what is the current political situation in Lebanon?
So no one having a majority in Lebanon. You know, as I said, the parliament is divided between many parties. Before we used to have 8th of March front and 14th of March front after the assassination of Rafiq Hariri, the former prime minister. And now we don't have this even. Politicians are very divided between themselves, and therefore they cannot agree on something. Actually, even small things, as we said at the time, they cannot agree on it. So, so the situation now is we don't have a president. The government is interim government, and the parliament is divided between all these politicians.
And who's stepped to? Sorry, do you want to have a drink of water or something? It should be okay. Have a drink. Yes. So who stepped into that vacuum then? Have civil society organizations stepped in, or have you seen international donors? Have Western governments have stepped in to fill that vacuum and provide some kind of stability? Because as we know, Lebanon is a very important country for one of Western allies in the region, Israel. So that if that country falls then it's not very good news, not just for Israel, but for the region as a whole. So who stepped into that vacuum?
No one. The vacuum is still there. No one stepped into the vacuum. I mean, some countries try to interfere and get involved to sort out the problem in Lebanon, because, as you said, they have their own interests in the region, and Lebanon is in the core of that. So, but nothing happened. As I said, the Lebanese people, not the Lebanese people, the politicians, the corrupt politicians, each one of them, they don't care about what's going on in the country and what's happened to this country, and they don't even see the Lebanese people going through all these difficulties and challenges. They only look after their own interests, and therefore all these approach or all these tries by these countries failed so far, and therefore we still haven't got a president, and we still the country the government doesn't function properly, and therefore I don't think there will be a light in the tunnel soon in Lebanon, unless we get rid of these politicians and remove them from power. As long as they are in power, the country will suffer, the people of Lebanon will suffer. And by the way, not just only the Lebanese people, we have millions of refugees in Lebanon, Syrian refugees, Palestinian refugees, who live as well in a difficult situation. But Lebanese people are the most affected ones, because they get paid by Lebanese currencies. The others can get dollars actually from NGOs, from others who help them. But really, the Lebanese people who are suffering a lot in Lebanon at the moment.
And what one can imagine in a situation like this, where there is a crisis, where there is a power vacuum, groups and organizations, sections of society that are well connected to other states in the region would become stronger. So I'm thinking Hezbollah, for example, connected to Iran. So why hasn't Hezbollah, or has Hezbollah exploited the situation to entrench its power even more? Or have we seen also maybe Saudi Arabia trying to push into the country and enforce its power and authority in the region? Have we seen examples of either of the two countries trying to dominate and shape Lebanon's future?
Well, the situation in Lebanon has two elements, one internal element and one external element. Internal element is between the parties in Lebanon, whether they are political parties or other parties, which they are fighting with each other for their own interest. And Hezbollah is one of these parties who's trying to, gain more power. He already controlled, Hezbollah already controlled the country in all level, actually, economically, security, political. So but it doesn't mean that they can do everything they want, because as we can see from the experience with the president, they couldn't even get the president they want to get it till now. We don't know what will happen in the near future. I think they will get eventually who they want to get, but it is not easy. So this internal situation between these parties make things worse and make things really more difficult to the Lebanese people, because in the end of the day, these political parties control the country, whether it is on the parliament or outside the parliament. That's one element. The other element is the external element. And these, by the way, these parties, they belong to a region power. Like, for example, Hezbollah is belong to Iran, and other parties like some parties who oppose Hezbollah, they are more close to Saudi Arabia, for example, and so on. The external element is what's going on in the borders of Lebanon, whether it is in the Syrian borders or in the Israeli borders, because we have two main regional powers in Syria and in Israel, and Lebanon become a letterbox for all these regional countries. When they want to send the messages to each other, they send it through Lebanon. And unfortunately, that's the situation in Lebanon. Lebanon is a puppet now, which anyone or any countries outside can play with it, and that's a huge problems for Lebanese, because any situation in Lebanon, they go out to see how they can sort it out. They can't sort it out between themselves. They can't solve their own problems, so they have to rely on regional and probably international countries like the United States, France, and others to sort out their problem. And therefore, nothing is being sorted, because unless the Lebanese people get together and try to sort out their own problems, no one will help them to sort their problems, because everyone else is busy in different things. They have their own challenges, whether it's Saudi Arabia and Iran, and Lebanon, no priorities is anymore for them, and therefore they stop even their financial support to Lebanon. At least the Gulf countries, mainly Saudi Arabia. Iran still gives Hezbollah, but it doesn't give the Lebanese government, and therefore we will go on with this situation for a while, unfortunately.
It's a tragedy, because on the one hand, the Western governments, they complain about foreign migration and the rise of migration and the impact it's having on Western societies. Generally, we see the crisis now in the West, but the way to stop that is to make sure the countries don't fail and collapse, make sure you don't have wars, make sure you don't have states like Lebanon collapsing and its middle class, leaving the country in droves and migrating to the West. So in the one sense, their policy kind of undermines their goal. The goal is to make sure countries are stable, and so you don't have a migration crisis, as we've seen. So it's very difficult to comprehend why they do that. The policies do not complement the goal they've set themselves. But let's end on hopefully a positive note, and maybe you can tell us what the Lebanese how the Lebanese public feel and about the future. Do they think there is an end to the crisis? What would be a potential solution to the crisis in the situation? Is it the government coming and forming? Is it the case of Western nations, foreign nations, foreign countries removing themselves from Lebanon and not using that as a battleground for their own proxy wars? I mean, how do they see the future? Is there a solution, and what would be the solution?
Well, Lebanese people are very resilient, very creative, very initiative. We all know that, whether it is in Lebanon or where they go out and we've seen many Lebanese people who they have an impact wherever they go.
Of course.
And therefore, I have no doubt that this will be the situation in Lebanon. But until we get to this point, we need to get rid of these corrupt politicians who are mainly behind the crisis in Lebanon. I cannot blame only the West or the foreign countries for the troubles and difficulties we have in Lebanon. I should blame our own people, who are probably the main, because if they get together and try to get rid of these corrupt people and have a new generation, and by the way, then the young people in Lebanon, they want to change, and they tried this revolution in 2019 for a change. Unfortunately, it's been stolen from them. It's been people used it for other reasons and so on. This is why it failed. But the young people in Lebanon still desperate for change, and we've seen that now with even elections. We've seen that the mentality of electing my leader only, regardless what he does or whether he is a good person or is a bad person, is changed now. It's changing. I'm not saying it's completely changed, but we can see positive things from young people. The NGOs who are helping Lebanon from different countries as well, they have an impact on that. They are training young people about how they about leadership, about how they deal with situation like Lebanon, like what we've got in Lebanon, how we can come from this crisis and so on. So there is a lot of hope in Lebanon. But as I said, unless we get rid of these corrupt people, the situation will not change. And unfortunately, it might take this sometimes to see a dramatic change in Lebanon.
And we will, of course, be keeping an eye on that story because it is one of the most important stories in the Middle East at the moment, the crisis in Lebanon. I want to thank Mohammed Kozbar for joining us and giving us your thoughts and insights. It's been a real pleasure hosting you, and I hope to see you all again soon in another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. Thank you all very much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.